welcome to Residing in North Idaho, community and lifestyle podcast, and sometimes real estate. Today is not real estate, but just know that we are, Dave and I and our partner Eric, we are full-time realtors here in North Idaho, and we would love to help you out with that if you're looking to make a move up here. Now for that, we have Derek Garcia in the house today, actually also a realtor.
True.
Oddly enough, but you have other things that you do in life that we wanted to talk about today, and that's why we brought you here. Yeah, we were having coffee recently, talking about some training stuff, and Derek was kind of filling me in on the life of a professional triathlete, and I knew nothing about it. Honestly, it sounds like a lot of work, and I was pretty fascinated, so I wanted to bring you in and talk about that and get the scoop on that. Cool. But even before that, you're a native from here, right?
I mean, I would claim to be a native for the most part. My siblings were born here. I was born in Southern California, as many people. I came up school age, when I was really young.
Okay.
My grandparents moved here in the 70s.
Okay.
And then my parents moved us here in the late 80s. So
I'd say your local status.
It is. I mean, I for the most part have lived my life here. Went to Coeur d'Alene High School.
What how different is the community from like when you were coming up?
It's incredibly different in certain ways. I would say it's also very, there's a lot that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
A lot of good things haven't changed. I joke with a lot of friends that we think back to maybe the 90s and how you still have timeline of how long it would take you to get to certain spots in town.
Yeah.
Just A to B places like, oh yeah, that's a 10-minute drive.
No, it's a hot topic right now.
For sure. And it's like, and now maybe it takes twice that long. And you're whining about it to your friends, but the reality is that like, it's still incredibly convenient to get around here. But at the same time, like it has changed a lot as far as that's concerned. And then also just, a lot of the growth here, it's been for the benefit, I think, of people who live here. When I was in high school and in my 20s, like not a lot of restaurants, not a lot of things to do, and that's changing.
Yeah.
And so that's nice. I mean, I think that we have a lot of things here that you get to have quality of life in so many ways, and you have to have some of the trade-off. You can't have it all. So yeah. No, it's changed a lot. It's interesting. I mean, I remember when lights would go up, on Highway 95, and people would really complain each light that went up.
Well, was it like stop signs before that?
Or just straight on through, man.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah. So no, it's changed a lot, but I also feel like, it just feels like a small town still, and like the connections that you have with people. And, I mean, anybody that's moving and shaking in Coeur d'Alene, like, because it's still a small place.
It does feel like a small town, but it is definitely grown.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to people, I wasn't up here in the early 2000s, and, I talked to people that had come through, and I've told them, I said, hey, you should come visit me. I live in Coeur d'Alene. And they're like, oh, we were there 20 years ago. It's yeah.
Oh,
it's little, and it's not. It's a big place now.
My grandparents or my grandmother on my dad's side oftentimes thought that we just like lived in like a big potato field, and like, our neighbor, I remember saying something about getting something from the neighbors, and she was like, oh, what, you walked there? And it's like, Grandma, it's like next door.
I think it's a bit shocking.
She's like thinking you'd have to like, you didn't ride the horse.
Right. I think it's a bit shocking, especially, I mean, you've seen it change a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, you talk to people. I know I was talking with one of our canine officers at Coeur d'Alene, and he was telling me when he went to high school here, how they would bring he graduated in like 99, 98. It's not that long ago.
Our age.
No.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that long ago. And, he was talking about the fact that they would bring their guns to school.
Yeah.
They would lock them up there. And then afterwards they would go hunting with a teacher.
That's so cool.
And that there was nothing paved north of Prairie. You say that to people now. I mean, that's a lot of change in 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And just like completely open campuses.
Right.
Like my dad I could have been in the middle of science class. My dad could have just like walked over, and, I'm sure technically he was supposed to get like a pass, but had he just like showed up and been like, oh, you forgot your lunch. Like, I don't think nobody would have been up in arms about it. It would have just it would have been a pretty easy thing. Again, you probably were supposed to go to the front desk to get a pass or something, but yeah, it's changed a lot. But I mean, I still feel like I have 3 boys, and I still feel incredibly safe here. I rode my bike everywhere as a kid, and, my parents, I think it's generationally too. I mean, they just were like, yeah, we'll see you later. In the summertime, I would just disappear and go to Tubbs Hill, and or go to Honeysuckle Beach, because we were kind of in the middle of town, and I would just go to a different lake each day in the summer, you know,
and
ride
it's
my
not
bike.
a far ride. I mean, it feels like a long, because it takes 15 minutes for me to drive from downtown Coeur d'Alene to Honeysuckle Beach, but in reality, it's like what, 3 or 4 miles or something.
Right. And I would stop and get candy and visit a friend, play some video games, whatever, you know, like do things on the way.
Sounds pretty awesome.
It was great. I mean, that's the thing that I talk about all the time. Like the 5 months here, you know, from basically when I thought about, you know, school, getting out to school starting, there's just glorious. Like and I've been a lot of places, obviously racing and doing different stuff. And it's like, there's nowhere I'd rather be in the summer. Cause it's just not that I don't like it here in the winter, but the summer here is just, it's like glorious.
Next level. I try to tell people, like, I don't go anywhere in the summer. Like, you don't, I'm not going to visit my family. Y'all need to come here.
When I see people go to like Cancun or Hawaii in the summer, like I get it. I love those places, but at the same time, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Especially if you have a boat. Or if you know, whatever, like, well, you don't even need a boat.
We're the same way. And honestly, I miss out on a lot. I want to go to Glacier National Park, and I just can't.
Right. Because
I can't leave in the summer.
You need to go
because there's so much that I want to do.
Yeah. I would say that's worth it. And I still feel like if I go to Glacier, it feels like I'm still taking part in the Northwest summer. Right. You know, like I don't feel like that's part of what I feel like is the experience of living here, even though I know that like some people will get a little snobby about like, is this the Pacific Northwest or not? And I firmly believe North Idaho, like the thin part of North Idaho is Pacific Northwest. Maybe Boise isn't. I don't know. Where the snobby line is.
Boise's in a different time zone. So you could make that argument, right?
West Coast time. So maybe that's it. Maybe
I think
West Coast time.
That could be the argument right there.
All right. I like it.
Makes sense to me. How did you get into triathlons?
Yeah.
Because that's like,
it's weird, man.
Yeah, I don't even like to drive that far.
Well, not only just triathlons, like you're a professional athlete.
Yeah,
right? Like high level shit, dude.
It was ridiculous because, you know, I grew up playing the traditional baseball, basketball, football, just and baseball is what I really loved. So I went through all the stuff here locally in Coeur d'Alene, you know, the Legion program, and I loved it here. Had great coaches, great system, had a lot of success in high school, both individually and like our teams were really good, and it was really fun, and it was a blast, and had planned on going, had a college scholarship to go play baseball, but just kind of melted down. Like it had been such a big focus for me, like my whole life, and for many reasons decided to stay local. I mean, part of it's just being a kid that mostly grew up in Coeur d'Alene. Like it's also like nerve-wracking to leave, go a lot far away to go play. But it really was, I just burnt out. And so, my freshman year of college, I just went to North Idaho College, ended up going, like just doing everything here. And when I was a freshman, it was when, Ironman had its first race here. And so, which is crazy because it's 20 years since they've had their first one.
Yeah. Sounds like 2002, 2003.
2003.
Okay.
And my dad is, like me and him are like, best buds. Like we talk about sports every day. And he messaged me and he called me and said, hey, like, did you see that Ironman thing's coming to town? And, at the time that was back in the days of, you guys remember Wide World of Sports, like
yes.
ABC? Okay.
Yeah.
Every Saturday, right? Like before I'd go do stuff outside, I'd watch sports in the morning, usually Sports Center, but on Saturdays it was Wide World of Sports. Well, around that time, ABC and ESPN made their merger, which this is really nerdy stuff, but it's because I'm super into sports. So this is my thought process. Okay.
Right.
Ironman's coming to town. I had seen Hawaii Ironman, the World Championships, but I had not made the connection that there was more than one. I thought it was just like the Ironman was in Hawaii. I didn't realize there was ones all over the world.
Yeah.
So I was like, what the hell? Why are they bringing Ironman to Coeur d'Alene? Like they had it in Hawaii. Like, why would they move it here? I didn't know. I didn't know the history. I just knew it was a super epic long race and it looked really cool. So I was like, I bet you I can get on Sports Center if I go downtown.
Okay.
So
here's the motivation.
Yeah. So I went down and I'm looking for the cameras. Like, where are the cameras? Like I want to get on Sports Center. Like that was whatever. It sounds super cool to like wave at the camera while Stuart Scott's like, I don't know what I was thinking, like totally off base on what, right? Well, so I went down and instead I just kind of like caught that bug of, oh, this looks really cool. It was very inspirational. And I was naive enough to be like, I bet I could do this, and really my only background was baseball, basketball, football. And I did ride my bike a decent amount, but it was like a BMX bike, you know, riding around town. And I remember going on long rides. Sometimes like once a year we'd camp and I would like borrow a mountain bike and we'd mountain bike at Farragut or something. But the reality was I had no business even thinking that I could do it, given I think at that time I'd never run more than 3 miles like consecutively.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to swim, you know, and I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And I remember like later that week I went to Walmart and I was like, I got to find a bike. I'm going to do this. And, you know, I didn't really know what I was looking for. And, sure enough, you know, I was like, man, $150. That's like the cheapest bike at Walmart. Right. I'm like, can't even afford this. You know, I'm in college. I have no money. I'm like eating potatoes and top ramen, you know, like, and triathlon's an expensive sport.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, I got to figure this out. Well, I just kind of like had it in the back of my mind. And that winter I joined Peak Athletic Club. And I was like, all right, I'll figure this triathlon thing out. I don't need a bike. I can just go to spin classes. So, you know, I was working odd jobs, going to college, and I was like, just started going to 5 a.m. spin classes and then just like right away going up and running on the treadmill. And I started just consuming books like crazy on like how to do a triathlon. And so in that next spring, I did Post Falls Duathlon, which is a 5K run. And I think it's like somewhere around 30K. So, you know, 20 or 15, 20 miles, something in there. And then another 5K run. I signed up for it. And my buddy who had done Ironman the year prior, who I graduated high school with, just like a hit it and quit it kind of Ironman, you know, to survive it. He's like, hey, you want, I'm getting a new bike. I borrowed this bike anyways from one of our buddies' dads. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah,
sweet.
So I'm like, I'm done. I'm in. I can do this duathlon. So I did this duathlon. I sucked. I was like, you know, out of 100 people, I was like 95th. And I thought I was going to die the whole time. You know, my only goal was to just get under 10-minute miles for the run. And the combined run, you know, the combined 10K. And I got done. And I mean, like I said, my hips and knees, you'd think I was 80. Like I was so hurting.
And how old were you at this time?
So I was 20, 21, something like that. Okay. So I'm like, yeah, really young. And I'm like, dude, this was awesome. It was so cool. And somebody's like, hey, when are you going to do the Coeur d'Alene Triathlon, which is the Olympic distance? So that one's about double the distance of that Post Falls Duathlon, right? And I had it in my mind, like, I'm doing Ironman. Like, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing Ironman. But I still wasn't quite telling friends yet because it felt like, you know, I don't know. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I also didn't want to, you know, overpromise and underdeliver. I was like, wait, I'm doing it. So anyways, ended up signing up that night for Coeur d'Alene Triathlon. And, you know, I like sign up, credit card information goes through and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know how to swim.
Oh, God.
And so I was like, I better start reading on how to swim.
There you go. Yeah.
And, so I was literally going to the pool with a book that I got from the library on how to swim. And I was like looking at the diagrams and I'd swim down, swim back and I'd be like, I don't know, that seemed right. Okay. And then I just like keep going. And so I did Coeur d'Alene Triathlon that year. And I signed up for like, honestly, after Coeur d'Alene Triathlon, I think I signed up for like 4 more races in the fall. I just was like, I love this. Interesting doing this. And and from that point on, you know, I had just had, our son had just been born, my first one, he's 16 now. So, oh yeah, we can do the math there. Yeah. Anyways, so he, you know, my whole thing was I could only train during sleeping hours on the weekends. I took Sundays off. I could only train during sleeping hours on Monday through Friday. And on Saturdays, I had free reign to train as long as I wanted. That was kind of the rules of the house. So before 8 a.m., after 8 p.m., and then on Saturdays, I would go crazy and just ride as long as I could.
Dedication, man.
So that was basically what started it. And I've always kind of been the type of person who, you know, I don't know if it's like an addictive personality or what it is, you know, ADHD, hyper focus. Like if I start to like something, I oftentimes I'm like, all right, this is what I'm doing now. And I don't really have, it's like just a singular focus at that point, you know? And so I'm like, this is going to be my only hobby. You know, I had friends who were like playing golf and wakeboarding, you know, wake surfing wasn't quite a thing yet. Like people are wakeboarding and they're people were golfing, all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm doing triathlons. I'm going to do an Ironman because that's my goal. And I wanted to do it in 2 years after I started. So, it was just a slow progression. And what I liked about it was when I was growing up doing baseball, a lot of times I would get judged for size. Like I was too small. I was kind of I was in the steroid era for sure. And boys, 15, all of a sudden were getting super jacked. And it was like, that's weird. I wonder why I'm not. And, so it was like, come to find out, like I was in the era of just guys, it was normal in the 70s and 80s to be 5'9" and 155 pounds, 170 pounds and play shortstop, because I wanted to play shortstop for the Dodgers. That's like what I wanted to do. Well, hate to break it to you, but like the guys that were playing in the 90s, Alex Rodriguez and whatever, they're 6'4", 225 pounds. Not only did I not have the height, but I also, wasn't riding up. So, but what was cool about triathlon was I was like, this is basically it is as blue collar as it gets. It's just put the work in and then there's the results. Yeah. And I didn't have teammates for the first time either. Now, I did recognize down the road when I started to race professionally, having a team around you was really, really important as far as like coaching and other athletes you trained with and people who supported you. But it was kind of freeing to not have a team to rely on. Like you can't blame it on anyone else. And that's one of the things I loved about baseball. And I think that's why a lot of kids quit baseball is because everybody's watching you. You can miss a block in football and maybe nobody sees. Sure, maybe on the film later, but the fans might not know. When you strike out in baseball, it's like you suck. You were the person that was supposed to hit the ball. Right. In triathlon, it was like that. It was like it's all on me, and I liked that. I liked the fact that it was like the harder I work, the better I get.
Well, there's those people that just like football or anything else. I mean, you watch all the movies and you see all the, all the feel goods and everything else. It's always the guy that wants the ball. It's the guy that wants the pressure and everything else. And I think that's really cool about triathlon is because you are the weak link and you're also the strong link at the same time.
Yeah. There's no hiding. Like you just, if you don't do something well, like there's really just nothing to blame it on except for you didn't train enough. You didn't do enough, whatever.
And imagine natural talent really can only take you so far. It is literally putting in the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, I was also in an era where, if you want to know other geeky statistics, like the first time that triathlon was in the Olympics was in Sydney in 2000. Yeah. And up until that point, triathlon basically started about 1980. Everybody that was in the sport was kind of a rollover from some other sport. So it was like they were a runner who then became a triathlete. They were a cyclist who then became a triathlete. USA Triathlon actually was actively recruiting college juniors and seniors in specific sports like swimming, to go, hey, have you thought about what you're doing after your collegiate career? Because we'd like to see if you want to, pursue the Olympics and triathlon. So I was in an era that was mostly people who did that. But now after the Sydney Olympics, what happened was an entire generation saw, I want to be an Olympian at triathlon, not just that happens to be the backup plan. So I was in the bulk of my 10-year, professional career went from where it was guys who kind of were like, they came from other sports. And even I was very, one of the last people, especially someone who didn't even run or anything, one of the last people to do that. Now at the highest level, you do triathlon from the start or you're just not going to make it.
All right. So hey, can I back up a little quick? So you were talking about the fact that when you ran that first, it was a biathlon or what?
It's called a duathlon.
Duathlon. There we go.
Same idea.
So when you did the duathlon, you told me, you felt like you were 80. Everything was broken down.
Yeah.
It was hard. So I'm very stubborn. I love to take on challenges like that. The only reason I won't try in a triathlon is because I hate riding a bike. I hate it. I hate every minute of it. I will run as long as you want. I'll swim out in the middle of the ocean. I don't care, but I hate biking. So
is this some childhood trauma we should unpack?
I don't know. I don't like sitting there for 8 hours riding the bike, maybe 6 and you're 4 hours.
I had a training partner that would joke about the fact he's like, how hard is cycling be? You're sitting down most of the time.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what I'm getting at is, you talked about, I know when I go out and I decide and I do have a wild hair and I say, I'm going to jump on my bike, I'm going to go do this. Or even in the summer when I start running a whole lot, I'll get out there and I'm sore. Like it hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 40 now, but even in my 20s and my 30s when I was running a whole lot, when I got back into it and those types of things, like when I did a really long run, I was sore. Yeah. And it takes a toll on your body. So my question is, you were talking about that with your first duathlon that you did.
Yeah.
But But as a professional, like, I mean, it's not something that you're kind of jumping into every now and then. It's something that you're doing consistently.
Yeah.
How does that, what's the wear on your body for something like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I joke now, like if I go to a physical therapist or a chiropractor or whatever, I'm like, hey, I'm a high mileage vehicle. So just keep in mind, I'm like one of those Toyotas that was bought in 2015. And they're like, why is there only 330,000 miles on this thing? But really, I mean, it could be worse because I could have ran. I mean, I know guys who by the time they were 22 were burnt out on running because they ran cross country by the time they were little. And, it's kind of the thing about endurance sports is there is some truth to more is more, like just the more you do it, the better you're going to be. I personally really struggled with running early. I mean, because of the fact that all of my running was on soft surfaces, and then you move to like running on asphalt or concrete, and it's really, really hard. So, as far as like getting to that place of being able to race professionally, what it was is it's just like anything else. Like you guys recognize the aspect of in the real estate world, like, when you're trying to build clientele, you're trying to build a YouTube channel, you're trying to build following on social media. You don't just, you never hear it was like, and then all of a sudden I had 1 million followers or whatever it is. Like it's a step-by-step thing. And in the same way, the volume that I took on as an athlete was a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, consistent thing. And I had to recognize that it just had to be exactly like that. An old rule of thumb is that you don't want to add more than like 10% volume in any given sport. It's like a very basic thing, but that might not always be true. But at the same time, yeah, it's just like understanding that, I had a really long-term vision that was a big, big goal. And I understood that I couldn't just go out and do that distance immediately. Right. And so I did have the patience because I put it out there a few years. Like I think a lot of people make the mistake of trying to do it in like 9 months or something. Now I have a coaching business and I do a lot of that, and I've had people who have come to me and said like, hey, I want to do Ironman and it's September and they want to do the Ironman the next year. And I'm like, I'm not going to coach you because they have no background because it's just not realistic. So that was a long way of saying, it really just was inch by inch to go miles is really what it comes down to.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I bring this up with my son all the time. I got a 15-year-old son. You do too. Yep. And it came up when we were playing video games one day, and I'll circle this back around, but we're playing video games. We're playing Mario. My wife got me an original Nintendo. Oh, no way. And so, we're playing Mario, and the thing with Mario is that you get on there and I go, and then when my guy dies, then it's your turn. And you don't get a turn until I'm done. So you have to sit there and watch the other person play the game and you don't get to do anything. And there's a patience that comes with that. And I feel like today, the youth and people that are struggling with having the success that you had, it's because they don't have the patience. And I call it the Batman theory. And here's what it came from watching the movie Batman. I'm sure. How old's your son? 16. Yeah. So all of our boys have been at a point where they're watching a movie when they're like 5 years old, 6 years old. They watch Superman, they watch Batman, they watch whatever else. And I remember it distinctly being Batman. The second the movie was over, 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever, my son was Batman. Like he's running around the house. Sure. He's Batman. He believes it all, and that's all that he wants to be. And what just happened is in 2 hours and 40 minutes, he watched a guy go from being nothing to being this superhero. And there's an expectation of no patience that stuff happens. What you don't see is you don't see the years of grueling work that you had to put into this. And a lot of people see somebody like you who's successful at Ironman and they say in September, and I'm guilty of this. I do this all the time. I fall into that trap because I want to do something and it's September and there's a race in May and I'm like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And that's hard. So I think the fact that you mentioned about patience is something that a lot of people lack nowadays because it takes that time to be that good at something.
Yeah. I mean, delayed gratification is one of those aspects that, I talk about that all the time and it translates. I talk about it with my boys. I talk about it with clients of mine now. And even in my own life, whatever goals I have, it is really difficult. I think we're just in an era of instant gratification. And so, when you want something, you can order something from Amazon in 30 seconds. And so it's just a learned quality. I think that you really have to figure out to do. I grew up pretty poor. And if we wanted to get anything, it was like, you better save up for like the next 18 months to get that $50 thing, or whatever. And, so I think it was partially that helped with that. It also was, I did play sports and it took a really long time. I was part of like a baseball program that took a long, long time to develop. And so I recognized that that was something that was worthwhile, but it is. And I would say it gets more difficult for me. You know, it's like I was born in 84, and that's like on the cusp of when a millennial is 84, like 83. Whereas I feel like I kind of relate more to the generation before me.
Right.
I always feel like I have older friends just when it comes to like how I relate. And
me too.
And so
I know. I'm that guy, I guess.
How old are you?
43.
Oh man.
I love hanging out with them. So I'm not the oldest guy.
I'm a B44 here. Yeah. I know. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thankful that I had the, you know, like, I mean, I don't know how well I actually planned it, but I'm glad I set it out there a few years in advance. And yeah, but you know, it's also incredibly gratifying to reach goals that take a long time. I mean, I guess that's another point too, like the idea of nothing that you do is worthwhile, or nothing worthwhile that you do is easy. I can't think of something that I've done that was really easy that I was like, oh, it's just so fulfilling.
Yeah.
Everything that I do that is worthwhile is hard.
Yeah.
There's at least hard stages. It just nothing's just like easy.
Right.
And I love, you know, there's a lot of, you know, gurus and people out there that I could name that I like or whatever that talk a lot about that, like doing hard things.
Right.
And for me, whatever that is, like I kind of dig into that, the idea that there's something really gratifying about doing hard things. And now that I'm retired as an athlete, I still want to challenge myself in ways, both athletically and mentally, you know, and relationally, that it's like, what are some hard things that I can do?
Right.
And I think that as long as you're continuing to pursue that, you'll have a lot of growth.
Well, that's why people respect athletes like that.
Yeah.
Because they know, I mean, if it was all that easy, when you see some guy like you mentioned, Alex Rodriguez, you see him up there. I mean, that's why people want to wear his jerseys, because they know the sacrifice that he put into it. You go out and you try to hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball, 580 feet. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
This is a common theme actually in the last couple of podcasts we've done is that doing hard things, grit, like, you know, what drives a man or a woman to do that. You know, it's like a cool topic that I love to talk about because I think a lot of us are kind of wired that same way of like, how can I find this challenge in my life? And I don't know why, but that gives me so much personal growth out of doing that. Like we do a lot of cold plunging and that shit sucks every damn time, dude. Like every time, but we're drawn to it and cause it's hard, I think. And it sucks. I like the suffering.
Yeah. I think that it's, you know, I don't necessarily seek it out all the time. Like, I mean, I'm sure you guys have brought up before, like, you know, somebody like David Goggins, right? Who's just like at that complete extreme of like wanting to suffer all the time. But I definitely just feel like for whatever reason, you know, that was ingrained in me when I was young. My dad was a really hard worker. I saw it. I recognized that like things don't come easy and I wanted to experience that. And I think the more that I dug into it, the more it just was fulfilling to do that.
Mm-hmm. So like for me, it's when I feel most accomplished, like I've actually done something. You know, our normal day-to-day job is a lot of like talking and interacting. And at the end of the day, sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like I did anything today, even though I may have, but going out and doing something, you know, cold plunging, working out, jujitsu for me, whatever. Those are the things that at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, like I felt like I did something.
Yeah. And I think just the physical aspect, you know, to be able to move your body and all those things are just so important. I mean, there's such a huge part, like with my boys, you know, my relationship with my boys, like it's something that's so big in our lives too, where we had like, I'll give you an example. My youngest son is really athletic and just he's such a good kid, but he's a total spaz. He's 10, you know, he's almost 11. And we have this thing where I have a half mile marked out from our house and I'm like, dude, you got to run a lap. So when things get crazy, like whatever, I can't get him to focus on homework. He, you know, does something that I'm like, that was lame. Why'd you do that to your brother? Whatever it is. Or, you know, he whines about taking the trash out. I'm like, do a lap. And I make him go run to the half mile. So he runs a mile. Yeah. You know, and my boys know that, you know, it's run a lap. But it's funny because we've even had these really good conversations afterwards where they're like, dang, that was like actually my head's a lot clearer now. It's a little bit of punishment. I mean, I that was why I struggled a lot with running. You grow up playing football and baseball, like it's usually just punishment when you run
sprints.
Oh yeah.
Run sprints.
Yeah. And then like run poles after baseball games, whatever. Right. Or like lines in basketball, afterwards, just hated it. Mm-hmm. But, I've tried to make that translation for them that like, hey, you're doing things that not very many people do. I think, and I try to dig into that with them a lot. Like if you want to be, better than other kids at sports, you want to be better in life at things, you got to do what other people aren't willing to do. And that might be, in our household, you do a lap.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
I love it.
That's a great lesson, I think, for them. And I think that's a lot of kids these days are lacking that. And the laziness in the youth right now is incredible.
It's interesting because what I found, like, what we were talking about like the or like the millennial, like cut for me.
Yeah.
I was one of like my last friends that was like texting will never take off. I mean, everybody's going to
I was busy playing Snake.
I was like, I was the last of my friends to like, because remember how texting used to be something that you had to buy?
Oh yeah.
Like
it wasn't like 10 cents a text.
Yeah. It was like a package, right? And I'm like, I'm freaking holding out. I'm never texting. I'm going to
call. Sending you like multiple texts just to piss you off because it costs you money.
Totally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, I was like, I can't respond. I don't have text messaging. So like the whole point of that was that like, when I think about all of the things that whatever changes are happening in our culture, I find myself someone who, like I said, kind of identifies as with a culture or a generation before me. I find though that if I'm not careful, a lot of the things that kind of plague our time bleed into my life. I have held out with my kids on having phones. Like my oldest has a phone, he's 16, but my 13-year-old doesn't yet. And we had really, really long conversations about why that was. And we have this yearly camping trip that's like more important to us than New Year's. I've been going to Priest Lake since 1989 every year with awesome. My dad, and then now my kids and my buddy and his boys come. He has 3 boys as well. And we go every single year. And it's like a big milestone thing. Like we look forward to it more than New Year's. So we take pictures every year when we're there. Like it's really meaningful. That's and cool. When I told him, I was like, hey, think about how much fun we've had just on the drives to Priest Lake.
Yeah.
Why? Because we have no service. We don't have phones. We're talking. We're excited about the camping trip. We're laughing. And then camping, no phones. Why is it so fun? Why is it so fun? And so I was like, and I said, just go to some of your friends' houses when you're like, 5, 6, 10 of your friends are all somewhere, and just sit for a minute. And I want you to just look at your friends and how many of them are talking. All their friends are there, and yet they're not there because they're all on their phones.
Right.
And I was like, just think about that, and so we had really good conversations about it. And I continue to have conversations with my, the younger two, because like this stuff just bleeds in. You were talking about the laziness, and I'm guilty of just being like, sounding like one of those guys at the American Legion Hall that's like 85, like these new kids, these darn fangled things. And, all this technology ruining us. But then I realized that like I do a lot of the same things if I'm not careful, because of the fact that it just bleeds in.
Oh, it's so easy.
Oh yeah.
It just eats away at you.
So easy. Yeah. I found myself late at night sitting there, and my wife's leaning up against a wall. I'm leaning up against a wall. We're both looking at memes.
Yeah. Or like sending them to each other?
No, not sending them to each other.
No, I'm not making fun of you. I do that with my wife sometimes. We'll literally be in the same room sending stuff to each other.
Yeah.
Like, why are we not just talking?
Right.
Right?
I was just talking about this yesterday with some guys. We just had a big talk with our son, and cut off games for 2 weeks for both the kids, because like and we've gone back and forth on this, but we tend to give our kids a lot of leeway because they're good kids and we trust them. And then like the game addiction is real. Yeah. So we had like 2 days of deep conversations with both the kids, and like trying to make them realize like, hey guys, you're like way too far on that spectrum. So they agreed with it, and because I didn't want to just like drop the hammer on them, but it was like, hey, like I want you to buy in. So 2 weeks, no games, and literally like within a day, their attitudes improve, everything improves. They're creative. My daughter, I'm like, she's hilarious. She's super animated now, more than she was, and like they're more enjoyable to be around when that is off the table.
Yeah. Man, I think about that, just how much time I spent didn't have anything to do. And so I went and did stuff or whatever, and I think that there's just an aspect
like when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, again, I would say it was partially because we didn't really have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, it's amazing how much more creative and all that.
Yeah. I never had video games growing up. Like my friends used to call them Amish. They aren't really Amish, but
right.
it was like very limited TV and no video games ever until I, moved out. And I always had shit to do. Like I was always in the woods. I was doing whatever dumb thing outside, but it was entertaining myself and being creative. And so I see my kids now and I'm like, you guys are missing out a little bit on this because your brains literally are, if you can just shut off and go play a video game, like, why wouldn't you do that? It's so much easier for your brain than to have to get creative and find things to do. It's a trap, obviously. And I don't know. There's a balance there somewhere because I don't want, I want them to have some of that because it's important.
Yeah.
Trying to find that balance. That's the hard part.
Well, it is hard because at some point they're going to enter the world.
Right. They need to know.
And that's one of the hard things that we know. Both of our kids have cell phones now.
Yeah.
And it's a huge part of their lives. It really is. I mean, it's not, it doesn't necessarily define them, but it is absolutely a huge part of their lives.
Yeah.
But the thing is that all their friends and everything else, they can't carry on a relationship with their friends without those things.
Yeah.
And the reason when my daughter invites her friends over, they know the rule. Her friends will come over. They all put their cell phones upstairs.
Like
if you guys are hanging out, if you're over at our house, you can come over anytime you want, but I own your cell phones.
That's a good rule.
You guys are together. So you guys are doing your thing. And I'm very strict on that. However, what I have found is I tell my son all the time, I'm like, hey, do you want to have a buddy over? He's like, oh no. I'm like, why not? Dude, I'll invite you over for a sleepover now. And I'm 40 years old. I'm like, come on over.
That'd be super fun, by the way.
Let's do it. So, but the big thing is that when his friends come over, the things they want to do are play video games and they can't do that together.
Yeah.
They have to have their own system.
Right. They need to be in their own room.
So he's like, we are hanging out this weekend. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Not the same, right?
But it is hard because, they get almost alienated at this point because every kid has it.
Uh-huh.
So when they're at school and they're the one kid without it, I'm not saying it definitely takes a specific character, to be able to get through that. But for the most part, they're almost alienated. You show up at school, you don't have a cell phone. You can't shoot each other a text. Right. You can't shoot each other an emoji, whatever else. It's almost like people are just going to pick another friend because they can't communicate with you.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
I think it's a struggle that, one, as a parent, I absolutely hate it. I hate having to deal with these problems because they don't make sense to me. I really struggle with that. But it is something that you have to deal with because if you just ignore it, then, then it slides off and your kid's like gone forever. But
no, and I think there's also just a lot to be said about having the discipline to be able to regulate. So like, for instance, the idea of, people that choose to have alcohol in their house with kids or people that have, anything that you have access to that maybe you wouldn't want your kids to partake in or too much of, right? Like, you could draw that line anywhere, right? Like what if you have just like a bunch of M&Ms? Mm-hmm. Like, can you trust your kids to not eat them or yourself to not eat them? Right. So the idea is like, I think there's also a lot to be learned in like that aspect of, sure, have a cell phone, have the candy, have all those things, but be able to have the discipline and the mindset that it's, again, I think it goes back to that like instant gratification. Are we able to recognize like to partake in certain things at the right, appropriate times? And I think that those are certain lessons that I know as a dad, I'm trying to figure out how to translate. It goes back to that athletic thing because of the fact that like when it came right down to it, a lot of times people would be like, oh man, how do you like refrain from ice cream or how do you refrain from XYZ thing that, some vice or something that would, affect you negatively in your pursuit of being a high level athlete. And oftentimes when I would have that question, I'd be like, I don't know. I guess at this point I don't really think about it anymore. And it's that's the idea of like, it takes a while to build a habit, and to build a habit takes discipline. But then once you have the habit, then it's no longer something that you have to spend so much mental energy going like, oh, I'm not going to partake in this, or I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to, it doesn't take as much willpower anymore because it's part of who you are versus a choice that you're making. It's just like, this is now who you are.
Right.
So that takes a while. It takes a while to get there.
Dude, you were doing this before the Jocko and Goggins days, bro. Is that even possible? It's like, I think Jocko invented that shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's amazing all the things that, man, that stuff just so resonates. It's like, wow. Yeah. Like I did meet Goggins years ago in San Diego, just like briefly. I had a buddy that ran or like sagged for him in one of his
what's that mean?
Like support. Like did like nutrition and gotcha. Support for him on one of his like the Death Valley, whatever the 100.
He drank water and stuff during that.
Pussy.
Not that much of a fan
I wouldn't
anymore.
have. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? It's way tougher than that. Right? Never seen him drink water in any of his videos.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
What when we were talking last time, you were kind of giving me the rundown of like a training week or like the day of a professional triathlete, like what that looks like.
Yeah.
And it's just like it was a shocking amount when you put the hours of time.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, so I guess to keep going with the story. So at one point, I raced in Portland. I did what was like a half Ironman distance. It wasn't an Ironman branded race, but it was a race that had professionals there. I qualified to get your pro card. It's similar to like golf where when there's amateurs and pros at an event and then your results are good enough, you have the option to take go race professionally and then have the chance to earn money. So when there's a prize purse and there's amateurs and pros, you have the option of, okay, your results are good enough. Now they say you can apply for a pro card. So I did that. And the following year I had found out about a group of athletes that was training in San Diego under a renowned coach in the endurance world. And they had like basically open slots. And so I applied and I put my resume was very little at that point, but I just was like, I'm the type of person that, you say jump and I'm just going to say how high. I'm just going to do whatever it takes to do that. And so part of that commitment was I was going to San Diego for 4 weeks at a time, 3-4 weeks at a time, and then coming home. I was going back and forth with the thought that I was eventually going to move there, but I had to kind of, I had to get my racing pedigree, like be able to get enough results and sponsors and all that stuff to be able to make that move happen. And so, yeah, I mean, I had figured out a lot on my own, but obviously at that point it was a big, that when I went down for the first training camp that was kind of like a tryout, so to speak, when I got accepted to be kind of under his tutelage and with these, like some of these Olympic athletes, I was blown away and I learned then what it looked like to really train, because I had been training really, really hard at that point. And I'd been putting in a lot of hours, but like when you see it's like a rookie in a locker room where you got a guy who's, a 10-time Pro Bowler or something. And you're like, oh, that work ethic's different. That preparation's different. That, every little thing that they do, every stone, everything is just dialed, figured out, taken care of, prepared for. And I remember that was kind of the experience that I had. There was a mix of athletes there as far as men, women, and accomplishments and stuff. But we had some people that it was like, oh, okay, that's what excellence looks like. And so, what I figured out was it's not just about like the volume. It's about what kind of mindset you have about that volume. Like, is this intentional movement all the time? Are you engaging with what you're doing all the time? Like you think about for instance, I had to start swimming much more because my background, not swimming. And I was starting to swim 90 minutes a day, we would have 3-4 months to prep in the year, like December, January, February, March, we're usually like kind of pre-season. And, I was swimming twice on Tuesday, twice on Thursday, And then every other day I was swimming once. So, swimming a lot. And every swim was about 90 minutes of intervals, not just like straight swimming, like you'd obviously break it up. But it was like, but in that swim, you think, let's say you swim a few miles in the pool, a normal swim might be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 or 6,000 yards. And it's like every single stroke that you would take, you would have to be like thinking about it. For me, especially not having a background in that, I had to really, really think. And I remember our coach oftentimes would film us way late in a session. So we'd get the GoPro and, film us underwater. And it's like, you're really fatigued. You maybe already rode 4 hours that day. You went and rode, 80 miles. You had an hour to eat. You got to the pool, and now you're swimming, an hour and a half swim set, and you're an hour and 10 minutes in, and he dunks the camera in there and to see what your form looks like when you're fatigued. And it was just a constant reminder of like, you just can't let off the gas in the physical, like just putting as much of yourself into it. But then also, are you making those brain to muscle connections, pathways to actually get better? Because it doesn't just happen. Like you have to, and what you realize is these are some really, really talented people, but they also work hard. Like you can only get so far on talent. You can only get so far on working hard. Like it's got to be both. You got to have some of both. Right. And so, yeah, on a given day, I mean, it was the joke that we would talk about, like within our little group, 15 was 3 sessions a day, 350 days out of the year. That was like that was the idea. Like you had 3 sessions a day every day, and you had about 15 days off each year of like maybe, and you were so used to it that even those 15 days, you probably still did something like cross country skied or,
that's insane volume,
like you still were moving. It was very rare.
Yeah. The 30 minutes of cardio I do a week just don't stacks up. You're saying I could do a triathlon, huh?
You definitely could. But that's the thing. I mean, obviously there's levels to everything, right? I mean, it's like
do a really slow triathlon.
Yeah. It was, I remember it was like a really big, like wake up call. I did my first race, and I did pretty good, 15th or something like that out of like 60 men, and felt good.
Yeah.
It's like
not your first Ironman, just your first race.
First professional race. So it was
professional race.
So it was a half Ironman. It was in New Orleans, and I get 15th, and I come back, and I was getting ready to go back to Coeur d'Alene, but I came back for so Sunday is the race. I flew back on Monday, and I got back at noon, and their swim was at 1. And he's like, you got back, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, all right, head to the pool. And I got in the pool, and they were doing like a hard swim. And I was like, and I'm like thinking like, I'm going to kick back, eat some food.
Just no letting off.
He was like, oh, what'd you think you were going to do today?
So let me ask you this. How many half Ironmans have you done?
I don't know. 50.
You've done 50?
Probably
70.3. Hold on.
50, yeah, probably. And then I don't know, 4. I think I've done 36 full Ironman.
And how far are those?
So
114.6?
140 miles is the total. 140.6 to be technical, but around 140 miles for the Ironman. Yeah. Oh, dude, I was realizing that I put more miles on my bike every year than I did my car.
I can't wrap my brain around this, dude.
I'm trying to do the math here. 140%, and you said you've done 50 of them? 50.
Yeah, probably.
Do you have 50 tattoos?
No.
That's a lot of stickers on your car, too, man. Damn. Yeah, and then 36 full triathlons.
7,000 miles on full Ironmans alone.
Yeah. That sounds right.
That's insane.
That's what I was saying, man. High mileage vehicle. Holy no, I know. Smokes. And you just kind of lose sight of it. I didn't really think much of it because I was racing, I'd race 2 or 3 times a month during the season, and mixed half and fulls. And yeah, I mean, you just kind of,
well, I know when you get into the rhythm, it's just like playing a baseball game. I mean, you can play 3 baseball games in a week and you're fine. You know what to expect.
Yeah. Whereas like if you, no, it really is that. Cause like you think about you play all those games, and then, you're not in high school or college anymore. And then 10 years goes by, and you're like, I'm playing beer league softball, and you play like 1 game
Yes.
And you're like, dude, I need 10 days off
That's
now
me.
because my back hurts. Right. And so, no, I mean, and I feel that now, given the fact that sometimes I think back to what I was doing and I was like, it doesn't even feel like, I don't even feel like the same person sometimes. I mean, it's like mentally I'm there. Like I can like go over, it's like the Uncle Rico, throw them balls to the mountains. I'm like, I could run over any mountains.
So when's the last time that you did an Ironman?
18, 19.
19. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you still run on a daily basis?
Yeah.
You'll see him on Tubbs Hill.
Yeah.
He's blown by me a few times.
Okay. I still try, it's like, I still enjoy those things.
Right.
Doing all those events. I remember one year I kind of had a rough end of the year where I went to Lake Tahoe, was there for a while, like acclimating to
some high elevation.
I went there for 5 weeks getting ready for like what was the last race of the season, like really felt primed, like I was going to do really well. And the week of the race, there was a forest fire and the race got canceled and I was super bummed. And so then I flew to Chattanooga. So I was going to do a high elevation, hilly, colder Ironman because it's in September. And I instead decided, well, this race is canceled. I'm pivoting and I'm going to go to Chattanooga. I'm going to go race an Ironman there. That was the next weekend, which is not really ideal to kind of do that, like all of it. And now it's a hot, humid, flat, totally different type of course.
Oh yeah.
And so I went over there and I got off the bike in third place and I got stung by a bee and I'm allergic.
Oh shit.
So basically it was like the universe was like, you're not gonna finish. You're like, this is the end of the season. Like, don't keep trying to race. So I was really just bumming and I felt real fit and just was like, what a lame way to like end the season. And so I had like a week where I was like, well, I guess it's just off season now. And so a buddy, that same guy that I was telling you, my buddy from San Diego, he was a sponsor, actually running store guy. And I was like, hey, are there any like dirt marathons or like anything like that? Like I want to do something. Like I don't want to do a road marathon, but I want to do something just to end the season for fun.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, there's a 50K tomorrow. And I was like a 50K running race. And he's like, yeah, it's a trail race. And it's like, the start's like 4 miles from your house. And I was like, can I get in? And he's like, yeah, the race director will let you in. And I was like, okay. So I just show up and to this 50K, so 30 whatever miles. and I'm like, I just show up in my regular like tank top and running shorts, and all these people are wearing like backpacks with, like camelbacks and stuff. And I'm like, well, there's gotta be like 8 stations, right?
Oh God.
Well, they're like every 8 miles, there's 8 stations. So I just like take off and I'm just like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. Like this isn't that much further than I normally run.
Yeah.
And I got second in this pretty big 50K.
Hell yeah.
It was awesome. I loved it.
Super cool.
But I remember that was like kind of one of those things where it's just funny to think about whatever, it's just another experience where I was like, what I recognized at that point was like, yeah, I love triathlon, but it's really about just like challenging myself in ridiculous ways.
So, I mean, that's your full-time job, right? That entire time, like you don't have time to work another job?
So what developed out of that during that time frame and I had sponsorship and then obviously
how much money do you make a year?
What I'd say is that it's there's a big gap, right? It's like the top 10% make a good living. And then the bottom 90, and that's changing some, but the bottom 90 you're kind of fighting over the scraps.
It's like real estate.
Yeah,
exactly. It's true. Yeah.
5 and 95.
So, I might go make 7,000-8,000 for a 4th place finish somewhere.
Yeah.
But like then take out travel expenses and all that. I might only bring home 3,000 for like an Ironman where I really did well. So I had to juggle sponsorship money as well as what I did over that time was I started a coaching business in 2010 where it was like, at first it was like buddies just like, hey, how'd you get fast? And so I would give them training plans and they'd get, throw me $50 or something like that. But then I was like, I wanted to do it more officially. So I kind of got into the online training game like fairly early. I didn't know a lot of people that were doing it at that point, 2010. And so that was a big supporter of my ability to like just pay the bills because like I said, I might have a great window where 4 races in a row, I would make a decent amount of money. And then I might go 5 months where I make like $1,500 because like that, that end of the season was going to be a big payoff. I thought, it's one of the higher paying races of the year.
Right.
And to do all that prep and all that stuff to not make any money at the race is pretty tough. So, so it was, if you're making $50,000, $60,000 as a a lot of guys were single, you know, bumming on couches and figuring it out, because that's just the way you got to do it. And it's even worse in like the Olympic development, because of the fact that you might get a little bit of money from USA Triathlon or whatever federation you're part of.
Yeah.
But like it's even less money and harder travel, because a lot of the travel is like out of the country.
I remember like a long time ago we were talking and you were telling me about all the miles on the road bike, and road bikes freak me out because I've taken, you know, being a former state trooper, taken a few crashes where people on road bikes got smoked, and you've been hit a few times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what ended my career.
Yeah.
In 2019, I got hit by a truck with a horse trailer. Like the horse trailer hit me, and that was the rehab and everything. Like from that was pretty much what ended it.
Is that common that people get, I mean, doing all that time on the bike?
I know. I mean, I just know a lot of like, there's a race that's called Ride the Divide. That's you ride from Banff all the way to it's Antelope Wells, New Mexico. So like you go,
damn,
you go, yeah.
Whoa, wait, what?
Yeah.
I drove that once.
I don't want to drive that far either.
Yeah. So the Continental Divide, like you,
gotcha.
So it's like a 2,700 mile race where you just go from Banff to the Mexico border, like as fast as you can go. And the guy that had the record for, 4 or 5 years for the fastest time, I mean, he died because he got ran over a few years later. You know, I mean, it's just the odds to get hit are the same whether you ride one time or 1,000 times, but the odds are, I think it's pretty good odds if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's tough is that, regulation for distance to, there's just not a lot of regulation for how much distance people give. Cyclists are hard to see. And then I also think cyclists make it hard on themselves because a lot of them are entitled and they ride in the road and they make drivers angry. And it's like, I get both sides of it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've been mad at cyclists or mad at people on motorcycles, because I'm like, it feels annoying, but really in the grand scheme of things, like my big thing that I would always think is like, okay, so they had to slow down to go around me or whatever it was. And it's like, how much did that really take out of your day?
Right.
To like slow down for a second. And so, and it's somebody's life. And, I even had, screaming matches at times with people who buzz me and then I caught them at the light or whatever. And it's like, like I pay taxes too, you need that kind of thing. Right. Like, like that's going to get me anywhere. But it's when you think about it. I mean, I've had a few situations, in 2012, I was diagnosed with cancer. And then in 2019, I was ran over pretty, and it's like you have those kind of close calls and you have a little bit of a different perspective on, when people are reckless.
Yeah.
Those are significant events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What tell me about the getting run over thing?
Well, what it was I was going around a bend, like just a gradual bend on a rural road, and a guy with a horse trailer just like he went around me. He did a good job of like going around me with this truck.
Forgot he had a trailer.
Yes.
He just didn't handle the angle super well.
Right.
Which I mean, I think we've all driven a trailer, whether it's a boat or like a covered trailer or something where you hit a curb.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh dang, I wasn't really thinking about that. So that was the curb. He hit me with basically the wheel well of the trailer. So yeah, I mean,
that sucks.
Yeah, it wasn't in like I've had situations where I've gotten hit and the driver, stops. I've had situations where I've gotten hit and they keep going. I've gotten, people throwing stuff at me. I've had everything thrown at me.
Right.
Name it. I've had it thrown at me when I was riding,
No thanks. Yeah, that sucks.
But that situation, I truly think he didn't know that he hit me. He got a horse in a trailer. He probably just thought the trailer like shifted or something, And I even think the way that the bend of the road was, he may not have even been able to see me in his rear view mirror.
Yeah. Because
of just the shape of the road and where his mirrors were and what he was thinking about. Like he may not even be able to see me.
Did he even know he ran you over?
He didn't stop. I mean, I don't.
Did that happen in Northern California? Because I literally took the exact same crash.
No, it was here. I don't even want to say where it was here because of the fact that I don't want to taint where it was, because it was it's an area that I would be like one of the safer. It was one of the places where I feel more safe. Yeah. But I don't even want to say it because it's like one of those things that I don't want people to feel like they can't ride there anymore, because it's a place that I'd still ride, or I would still recommend somebody could ride.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you don't mind me asking, so you overcame cancer while you were racing as well?
Yeah, it was during my racing career, which was right at the beginning. And that was brutal to go through.
That is gnarly.
Yeah, dude. And you know what we were talking about with like the community support or like the Coeur d'Alene community, like just here's an example. That was in 2012. And, I'm not kidding. So I was diagnosed on a Saturday. The only reason I even got in to see a doctor on a Saturday is because someone in the community that I knew, I told them what was going on. I'd known for a couple of months that I was having an issue, but I didn't, I thought it was something to do with riding. My riding volume had increased. So it's testicular cancer. So, you know, just as far as that's concerned, like don't have to get into the details, but basically like I noticed some things were different. And so I mentioned it to a friend who had a friend who was, you know, connected to be able to get me in to get an ultrasound. And they said like, dude, you got to go to the doctor. We'll get you in. Just go there in the morning. And so sure enough, you know, on a Saturday was diagnosed. On the Tuesday later, I had surgery.
Wow.
I mean, it just goes to show, like, just super cool. That's how
awesome.
It all worked out. But by the time I was out of surgery on Tuesday, so I had already had different members of the community, one who put together a 5K in Post Falls, one who put together a 5K in Spokane,
Jeez.
and one of the major churches here in town put together a spaghetti feed. Like, by the time I was out of surgery, all three of these things were ready to go, where they were like, we're going to support you. We're going to help you figure it out. And that I think is uniquely Coeur d'Alene.
Right.
You know, that to me was like, or the Coeur d'Alene area, you know, the greater Coeur d'Alene area. Like I said, 5K in Spokane, 5K in Post Falls, spaghetti feed, Coeur d'Alene, all within, I'm not kidding. It had only been 4 days.
Yeah.
They knew I had kids. They knew that, you know, I had a family. They knew that, like, and I had been involved in a lot of big community things here, you know, part of big churches, part of the, you know, a big high school, part of like an Ironman being one of the bigger events. Like a lot of people knew who I was.
The local favorite, probably.
Yeah, it was just like it was like a really fun thing to be, like someone that was rooted for, you know, to do well, because it was like, oh yeah, he grew up here. Like, we want to support him. It's like just anybody who makes it big in any sport. Like, you know, it's small potatoes, no pun intended for Idaho, but small potatoes for like, right, like doing triathlon. But it is like Ironman was a huge community event, and to be, you know, a big fish in a small pond was like, it was. I always felt really, you know, like really humbled by that, because of the fact that, you know, it wasn't something that came easy. I really worked for it, but at the same time, like, I wouldn't have got there without, you know, certain coaches that I had growing up and certain people who had supported me along the way. Like, I just wouldn't have got there because it developed me.
You know, it's neat that you talk about this being, you know, such a small community. And like I said, I always kind of correct myself and correct other people. I say it's really not. I mean, there's a lot of people up here, but something that is kind of unique to this area is that it really is an isolated region. Yeah. And, you know, I equate it to where I came from. You know, it was just the concrete continued forever. Yep. You know, you could just go forever pretty much here. I mean, you go from here to Spokane and back, maybe up to Sandpoint. And then there's nothing else that you're going to. Anything else is a trip. Yeah. You want to go to Missoula, you want to go to Kalispell, you want to go to Boise, you want to go to Seattle. It's a trip. It's not the same community at all. There's definitely boundaries. Yeah. And I think for that reason, it is very small. I mean, people know each other here. Yeah.
Shocking amount, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's just the nature of the mountains and all that, because like, you know, you think about a place like, you know, I have friends who've moved to the greater Phoenix area. Yeah. And if you went to Phoenix, the greater Phoenix area in 2005, you know, things were extending, but now it's like you said, it's gotten like, you can just drive.
Well, you don't know what city you're in.
No, it just blends. Right. And here we have some definitive physical characteristics that break it up.
Oh, for sure.
Mean, the state line somewhat breaks it up, but then also, you know, like, yeah. So I think that's definitely a big part of it. And I just think in general terms, most people that you run into here also recognize that the resources that we have, like the resources in nature that we have are pretty dang unique and worthwhile. And anybody who I talk to who doesn't recognize that, I probably am not that good of friends with, because I just don't really understand how you can recognize it.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of people that take advantage. I know we're getting short on time here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that take advantage of what you've done, just being outside, being outdoorsy, taking advantage of the cycling, the running, the swimming, those types of things, and just what Coeur d'Alene does have to offer. They did a study. I think it's over the past like 10 years, and they've named like the happiest country in the world. And I think it was Sweden.
I thought you were going to say Coeur d'Alene. Like, yeah. All right.
No, but
country,
they named it as, I think it was Sweden, Norway. It was one of those up there. But they named it as the happiest group of people, and they equated it to the resources of just being outdoors and being in nature and everything else. And when I think of the United States, there's a lot of neat places to go. There really is, but there's very few places that you live within it. And there's very few places where you have those resources. And really there's not a whole lot more to do other than to take in the mountains and the skiing and the bikes and the lakes and those types of things here.
I just don't think you last here very long if you don't, because the reality is that we don't have like major industries here. I know tech is growing here. At least that's what people say. I don't honestly know if that's how true that is. I don't know the statistics, but I understand that like, I realize you got to embrace the seasons. You got to embrace what each season brings, because that's important, because some of them are longer than others. Winter can be long here. But at the same time, like, you just don't last long, because it's like, it's not worthwhile. Like, why are you here?
Right.
If you're not going to be doing those things.
That's a big part of the value of this area,
draw, and but it's the reason. And so I think that's also why you get so connected, because once you start to realize, like, I just couldn't, when I was living in San Diego, for instance, I still came up for that Priest Lake trip.
Yeah.
Every year. I made that week. That was one of the weeks I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because I'd race Ironman, and usually I'd go the next week after. We'd come up here for that time, and then we do that trip, because in my mind, it was like, there's no other place like that for me, to go. My dad will probably be mad that I'm mentioning this on a podcast.
That's all right.
Not that it's people know about
it's not easy to get up there, really. It's
I'm not going to tell you which spot
don't even mention it. Yeah. Hey, you're still coaching, right?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do both.
What's your business
athletic
name?
coaching. It's Derek Garcia Multisports. Easy to get a hold of.
Cool. I'll put the link. You have a website, and
I do.
I'll put the link in the description too, so people can find you.
Yep.
Great. Yeah.
If any, do you train just asking for a friend, like a mid 40s, slightly overweight, 30 minutes of cardio a week? Do you train someone like that for an Ironman?
I train people anybody who does anything from, they want to do a 5K, they want to lose 50 pounds. They want to do an Ironman. I have people that do 100-mile road races, running races. All aspects. And I do some corporate coaching as well. So work with businesses on, getting their clients, staying in shape and motivated and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's a broad spectrum of people that I coach, and it's morphing, as my focus was endurance athletes for a long time. But as my life changes and I grow and understand kind of more of what it's like to be in this stage of life, like, getting to be 40, and I recognize that there is a huge demand for, hey, how do we figure out how to just stay active, stay strong, stay healthy? It's really, really important to me. It's something I'm passionate about, because you might not be pursuing professional athletics, but like, it's really, really important. Like, I want to be able to do a few things. Like, I want to, be able to chuck my kids in the pool. And I tell them, at whether it's endurance stuff or whatever, I'm going to kick their asses as long as possible, because that's like, I'm going to be 60, man, 70, still fighting them to beat them in a sprint or whatever it is. Cause
that's a good goal.
I want to have that experience with them.
Yeah. So I like it. Well, on that note, let's call it. We're about time. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Derek Garcia. We'll have all your contact info in there so people can get a hold of you if they want to punish themselves. Or hit those goals. I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah. Thanks, brother.
Of course.
All right. Catch you next time.